'Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. 'Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you're listening to Jams and Tea.
Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea, and I apparently talk like some guy who is announcing an NFL score. And today we are going to be covering 3 records. We are going to be covering 2 new albums. We are going to be covering the new album from Scottish post-punk? Post-rock band Mogwai, their new album that is called
As the Love Continues.
That's the one. And we are also going to be covering the new album from Black Dresses podcast veteran artist Black Dresses.
The notably,
what was that, like episode 5?
Yeah,
it was one of those ones. But the notably deceased Black Dresses.
Yes. So back from the dead. We are going to be talking about their new album, Forever in Your Heart. And we are going to be talking about the final record today, which is the Record Club episode. It's going to be a separate episode from this one. This week we have August's recommended album, which is Philosophy of the World by The Shags.
Which I have listened to multiple times because of August.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be real with you all. Once was definitely enough.
I look, you know, we'll get into that when we get into that, but I can certainly say that this is one of the few albums that's only 30 minutes long that I would not begrudge someone who didn't revisit that or listen to. So, you know.
No, like, I listened to it once. Every second of it is in my memory still.
It's kind of hard to take out.
I can vividly recall every single song.
I mean,
anyway.
We're all happy and gay here.
Absolutely.
That's true. Absolutely every day.
And so we kick off, as ever, with a recap of what we've been listening to the last week. Jake, what have you been listening to?
Well, I have listened to a number of things this week, namely the things we are going to be talking about today, just because they have been rather interesting releases, to say the least. In preparation for today, I actually went back and visited a Black Dresses album that I had meant to get to for a while because it had been recommended since we had covered that original record by both Tyler and Saoirse. I listened to Love and Affection for Stupid Little Bitches. And I mean, look, I was very tepid on the previous Black Dresses album, Peaceful as Hell. I didn't really know what to make of it. So when I went back to this, I was just like, okay, hopefully this will be like Waste Isolation and I'll just kind of like get it. And man, that shit slaps like a motherfucker. I love that album. It's great. Just like 30 minutes of really awesome kind of Black Dresses tinged with like weird hyper pop shit. It's cool. It's awesome. Super accessible. I would very much recommend that people start there if they're one to get into the band. I listened to 2 records that are like brand new, but we're going to be talking about them next week. So no real point in that. But I listened to another album at the recommendation of someone on this podcast, that being Tyler. It's something I've been meaning to get to for a while now and haven't been able to because it is so fucking long. But it also just sort of a 2021 artist who I'm trying to just speed through in terms of their discography. I listened to Miles Davis's Get Up With It.
Nice.
2 hours of that shit. And my God, what a colossal fucking record that is. It's great. Oh my God. It earns every second of its runtime, so that's like the best compliment I can give it.
Yeah, a notable record for the fact that Miles actually spends more time on that record playing the organ than playing the trumpet. I think in particular of the track Rated X, where the organ sounds like literal sheets of noise. Like it sounds like a fucking Murs Bell track, and it's recorded.
I mean, the whole album is just like he is gone so far into jazz fusion that he is literally just turning it into different genres, and it's just like, yes.
And that's the thing,
yes!
like that's the thing about it. Like I say, there's this noise track on it, but like no two tracks on this record sound the same.
No.
It's very eclectic and varied. So I mean, yeah, it's just such a patchwork of just everything that makes Miles Davis such a creative person.
Yeah, and it fucking rules. And I guess I'll addend that, so technically a third listen, just because I haven't listened to tons of shit or anything. But I did also listen to Kind of Blue, which I think my first listen of that was over the break. So we didn't really I didn't never really like mention that I listened to that. But yeah, Kind of Blue. Miles Davis, good musician. Think he might have been onto a couple things, made a few points and such. Kind of Blue, maybe one of those points.
You're talking crazy.
Jake. I know. I believe that album is notable for Morgan. When I said I was going to listen to it, he said, if you don't give it a 10 out of 10, I will like hit my dog or something like that. And I was just like, well, Morgan, congratulations. You don't have to hit your dog.
Yeah. Like classic. It's like one of those records that is incredibly important for the fact that it completely invented or not necessarily invented, because there were other examples of modal jazz before it, most of them by Miles himself, but it's the first kind of major full-length modal jazz record, so you can appreciate it for that. But even if you don't know anything about modal jazz, it's just a beautiful record to listen to, and it's the players are uniformly spectacular. The melodies and the progressions are just outrageously hooky and addictive, and it's just beautiful.
Just easy, like that's a great gateway jazz album if you just are looking to get into it. Like it's a perfect length. I think it's just like all of the sound. Just yes, listen to that if you haven't, but you know it's what it is. I listened to I'm not sure what prompted this at all, frankly, but I listened to a Tears for Fears record. Oh, I remember now. I was watching something with Steven Wilson and he talked about it because he remastered it. I listened to a Tears for Fears album. I listened to Seeds of Love. Yes. Which
this is What's in My Bag, right?
Yeah, which fucking rules. That album is fantastic. It's a very, very different beast than say Songs from the Big Chair, which is just sort of like classic pop song after classic pop song that's just like the best ever, whereas Seeds of Love is just like it's a bit more like dense and like baroque and adventurous, and as a result, like I don't know if I would say it's better or worse than Songs from the Big I'd probably put them on equal footing, but as a result it's amazing. I'd say if you're a fan of XTC, get on it, because it's very much in that vein.
I haven't heard it, but I was about to say from your description, it makes me think of Skylarking, so I'm probably going to love it.
That is basically exactly what I would compare it to. And I guess the last first listen I'll mention is I listened to, again, Tyler coming through here with some music recommendations. I listened to my first album from ambient artist Stars of the Lid. I listened to the Tired Sounds of Stars of the Lid, another behemoth fucking album, but I needed like a lot of music to just sort of keep me going this week. Like, and man, this fucking record, holy shit. It's rare that I would call such like beautiful and tranquil ambient music exciting, but like it is. It's just front to back, it is some of the most enjoyable kind of calming. It put my soul at peace. I needed to like come down from a few days or just some shitty days I had this week, and I just like listening to certain segments of this. I think the first couple parts of it, it's like Requiem for a Dying Mother. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Those segments are like, oh, holy shit. And like the rest of the record is still as good as those parts, but that's something that I just really needed this week. But yeah, that's been my week.
Yeah. I had a very similar experience with what I talked about last week, being the new Loath record, which is also an ambient record, where it just, you know, having a shit time just completely set me at ease. And there are tracks on that will make me cry whenever I listen to them.
Yep.
Yeah, I wrote about the Tired Sounds briefly this week in a Twitter thread, and one of the things I wrote about was how the first time I listened to it, it coincided with me reading Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, and like even though you're right, it's a very calming record, I also find it a really kind of desolate and almost kind of haunting record, and maybe it's just because of my association with that book. But when I listen to it, it's kind of like I'm in this desert landscape of like. Yeah, and it's just really transports me in a vivid way.
I can see that too.
So
there's a dead baby tree, you know.
Yeah.
Just ambient stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ambient tings.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I was there August.
Yeah.
All right. What I listened to this week. Let's start off in the 1990s with the little classic singer-songwriter stuff. PJ Harvey's "Rid of Me," an absolutely fantastic record. I love that it's very violent. It's very sexual. I think Albini's production works really well for what this record is going for. Kind of in contrast to how I believe on an earlier opening segment, I bemoaned his production on the Pixies' Surfer Rosa. I think his style of just everybody gets their turn loud in the mix works really well for fucking. Oh, I thought I was frozen for a second.
You're good.
Nope, you good.
And anyway, I think it works really well for the kind of loud, quiet dynamics on this record. I think it's really a really exciting record. Just great at being both a singer-songwriter and a rock album. I enjoyed it a ton. Moving along to the 80s, I listened to a classic, kind of the record that birthed European power metal, Halloween's Walls of Jericho.
Ooh, I know this one.
Yeah, it's a very fun kind of very early new wave of British heavy metal, thrash metal inspired record that obviously went on to really define its own sound. The vocal performances by then lead vocalist and guitarist Kai Hansen are just absolutely incredible. It's a really exciting record that has a really good deal of self-awareness and humor to it. I would recommend it if you're into that kind of thing, and more specifically, if you don't know if this is going to be your vibe or not, listen to the first song, "Ride the Skies," and if you fuck with that, you're gonna fuck with the rest of it because it's great.
Correct.
Moving on to some releases from this year that we're not covering on the main podcast. I listened to Madlib's Sound Ancestors, which notably features some collaboration from Kieran Hebden of Fortet fame. Ultimately, I can hear his contributions here and there. It ultimately does still feel more like a Madlib project than deserving of that proper collaborative status, but
it's worth mentioning that it's just billed as a Madlib record.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And Fortet's contributions aren't like typical, like it wasn't that they were working together on the music, it was that Madlib made the music and gave it to Fortet to organize and shape in the way that he wanted to shape it. So
yeah,
it was a bit of an unusual sort of collaboration.
And that's what I mean by hearing his influence. I think you can really hear that in like the flow and pace of this record. It reminds me of early stuff like Rounds and Fortet record immediately after that, which name is failing me at the moment. But point is, it's good. Not like completely stellar, but I still think it's a really enjoyable, fun instrumental hip hop experience worth having. a very recent record that came out today. I listened to the new project from Blank Mass called In for their new record. It's a progressive electronic record that feels a little flavorless, even if there is some really, I think about the first 8 minutes of it are worth listening to, and the rest is pretty disposable. But yeah, it's not the worst thing ever.
Yeah, I listened to that one this week as well, and it has a very different feel to the other Blank Mass records. It feels very much like more of a sort of side project than an actual Blank Mass record, because notably Blank Mass records are made up of like different pieces of music, whereas this is kind of like one flowing 40-minute thing that's split into two halves for the vinyl. So it's really kind of more of a side project thing, I think.
Yeah.
So is it supposed to be pronounced Black Mass, like
Blank.
BLANCK, like that one? It's supposed to be pronounced black.
Blank.
Oh,
But
I thought you
like,
said black.
It's not a good name.
It's not a good name.
No, it's fucking stupid. Is the point that I was getting at.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a shit name. They should get a better name.
I love
more
how
important.
we just danced around the fact that it was
just sucked the air right out of the room. Like Blank Mass was in the call, and we were just like not wanting to hurt their feelings.
So yeah,
no,
fuck
like
you, Blank Mass.
I had misheard you, and then that led me to making the point of, like, regardless of how this is pronounced, that is a goddamn stupid name.
It is the side project, or it is the solo project, I should say, of one half of the noise post-rock duo Fuck Buttons. And I do highly recommend the other Blank Mass records, especially World Eater, which is a great fucking album. But yeah, this was seemed more of like an experiment than a fully fledged record.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would not be opposed to checking out their other supposedly better records. To wrap up, I'll talk about something recommended to me by a friend of the podcast, Laura, the record Dogma 1, Death of the Dramologist by the Swedish grindcore band Asterisk. This is a very intense, face-melting grindcore record. It gives you about everything you could want out of grindcore. If that's your vibe, listen to it. It's 15 minutes long. You've got no reason not to. Nice. And yes, that's what I listened to.
Super.
Morgan, hello.
A lot of instrumental stuff I've been listening to this week, inspired by the fact that I'm reading and the fact that I have phlegm, apparently.
Bless you.
I gave a re-listen to Mogwai's debut record, Young Team, which I hadn't heard in a few years. I mean, it's Mogwai's Young Team. It's like the post-rock album, in a lot of ways. It's certainly the first one that comes to my mind, anyway. Yeah, it's like perfect. So there's that. I noticed on Spotify that they, alongside the fact that they finally added the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack, they also added the one for Silent Hill 3, which it frankly is just as good. I think the only drawback that I have for it, and the reason I ultimately prefer 2, is that it has these
snippets of dialogue.
Yeah, like
fucking hated that shit, man.
It's like I want to listen to the damn soundtrack. I'm not watching a video game cutscene. Go away.
It's not like it's a separate like skit track or anything either. Like sometimes it'll just be built into the beginning or ends of songs on the soundtrack, and it's like, what? Why?
Yeah, and it's like the main antagonist spouting a bunch of witchy nonsense, and it's like,
what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
You're the only part of this game that I don't like. Shut up.
Like, it's not even that. It's like removed from the context of the game. It just sounds fucking stupid. Like, it sounds like she is
light in the darkness will blur.
I mean, it's like she's having a fever dream and is just listing stuff off. Like, whereas in the game, it's like really eerie and foreboding. And here it's just like, can we go back to the trip hop jams? Thank you, please.
It's like taking shit out of context from like Twin Peaks and then just like shoving it into like the Angelo Badalamenti soundtrack. It would just be like, what? Why?
Yeah, except that would be better because it's Mark Frost and David Lynch dialogue, and it's not in Silent Hill 3, like, and your father's blood will be the death. Blah. Anyway, the other thing I will mention is that I gave a re-listen to the Last of Us Part 2 soundtrack, which is actually a collaboration between the composer of the first game, Gustavo Santaolalla. Sure, yeah, let's go with that pronunciation.
Santaolalla.
And Matt Quayle, who is most notable for doing the Mr. Robot soundtracks.
My boy.
And through their combined efforts, they completely surpass the original soundtrack, in my estimation.
Correct.
Pretty much the only thing about part 2 that surpassed the original, but anyway. Good game. Leave me be, internet.
Video game podcast.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It like vacillates between this really amazing Mexican style flamenco guitar work and like the most blisteringly loud industrial shit I've ever heard in my life, and it's pretty based. Yeah, that's all I got.
A few months ago, I edited a video essay for our mutual friend Davey's YouTube channel on The Last of Us 2. And it's entirely soundtracked by the score for that game. So I spent a lot of time listening to that soundtrack, and I can confirm everything Morgan said. It slaps so much. No, if we're talking about stuff that I've been listening to this week, I want to start by something I finished listening to half an hour before we started recording, and that being Light Bulb Sun by Porcupine Tree. And it's amazing.
I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I actually was kind of surprised that this was made before Deadwing. Because like Deadwing to me feels like an album made by a younger person. It's not to say it's worse or better. It feels like it's got more like youthful vivre to it. Whereas this is much more like an album I'd expect from someone who has been sort of is maybe more concerned with building your sort of rep. It feels like an album made by someone who's been making music a long time. And that is only to its benefit. But even though the most Deadwing moment on that record, that being sort of the second half to the song Russia on Ice, just absolutely, it's my favorite moment on that record. Just took my socks off. And the whole thing's incredible. And I listened to it while I was reading The Gunslinger, and it was perfect.
So basically you were morphing into me is what you
right. And it was great. Now to move from Jake Core to the most Saoirse of Saoirse Core. I listened to
punk.
You are more correct than you know, but not quite. I listened to the demo tapes for the Sunset Tree, which were released with the vinyl of that record, and some lovely person uploaded it to YouTube, and it's a like official release called "Come Come to the Sunset Tree," which quotes is a longer quote from the same play that gives the title to the record of the Sunset Tree, that being a play called The Way of All Flesh by Samuel Butler, which is about a character who beats their son because through a lisp they can't pronounce the line from a hymn called "Come, come, come, come to the Sunset Tree." So yeah, that's all there. And there's lots of tracks on it that didn't make it onto the record, such as the closer of the demo tape version called "The Day That Aliens Came," which would have made for an interesting close of the Sunset Tree because it's much more optimistic, and it's much more sort of about the idea of I know that this is all going to be over eventually, and when that day comes, I'm going to be very happy. And it's a wonderful deep cut that even if you don't really care about the Mountain Goats or their lo-fi sound, I would recommend. And the whole tape is really interesting, and the fact that it doesn't have the lush orchestration of the Sunset Tree, and it's much more like the early lo-fi Mountain Goats records, gives it a much more intimate feeling to the tracks that give it sort of not better but different emotional dimensions, whereas the album is much more about the strings on Up the Walls, for example, using the orchestration to really complement the emotions of the record and bring out the full force of it. With the demo tapes, it's just very naked, and it's just a different vibe, but I think it's really great also. What else have I listened to this week? I want to highlight the fact I listened to Goodness by the Hotelier. And it is my favorite Hotelier record.
Yes, me too.
Yeah,
more like greatness,
right?
You have achieved greatness.
And one of my favorite Hotelier song is still on Home Like No Place Is There. Goodness is just such a holistic sledgehammer of feelings, and I love it.
Soft animal go bird.
Yes. Speaking of emotional sledgehammers, I listened to Sprained Ankle by Julia Holter.
Julia Holter?
Julia Holter.
I'm gonna say nope.
Not
That
quite
would be
right.
a very different album.
Very different. Julia Baker. I always
that
get them
face
confused.
when you have a stroke.
I always get them confused. I don't know why. But no, and I wanted to cry because it's very good. Also, Magdalene by FKA Twigs made me want to cry because it's very good.
Yes.
I just want to highlight the closer to that record because it is just astonishing. And
Cellophane?
Yeah.
That was the lead single, and oh man,
Oh boy.
I knew I was in for it.
Yeah. And I want to highlight a sort of record that's kind of uncharacteristic for me to talk about. It's my final one, that being The Poet by Bobby Womack. This wonderful soul record that's sort of also influenced by like R&B and jazz, and it's great. It's probably my least favorite of the 5 records I've talked about, but it's still very high quality, and I recommend it.
Yeah. All right. So my listens in the last week have been interesting, to say the least. First record I want to shout out is I got around to listening to Rush's Vapor Trails. Specifically the remixed version, which is really good, really strong record. I think it is a little too long, but when
I wouldn't disagree with you.
But when that is the major complaint, and there's really nothing else, then it's difficult for me to really hold anything against it. It's a really great record. Super enjoyed it. Would like to spend more time with it. Yeah, really great. Especially great as a comeback from Test for Echo, which is maybe the most forgettable album ever made by anyone.
Yeah, it's their worst.
I can remember them. I can remember Geddy Lee saying "Test for Echo" on the chorus, and that's about it.
Well, that's one more thing than me. I also listened to, it's going to really hurt Morgan that I liked this record more than Vapor Trails, although there's not much in it. But I also listened to Dream Theater's Awake, which is not as good as Images and Words. I won't go that far. Definitely is a little bloated as Dream Theater are wont to be. But I still really dug it. Like, I thought it was really entertaining, really... I didn't find it overly theatrical in a way that was grating to me, as I think Dream Theater are to some people. I thought it had some really fantastic songs on it.
You can just say Jake.
I particularly liked the opening run of the first three songs, 6 O'Clock, Caught in a Web, and Innocence Faded. I thought were excellent. The Mind Beside Itself Suite is pretty good too. It gets a bit kind of samey in the back half, I think, but then it finishes really strong as well. So yeah, dug that quite a bit. Probably, I think, going to continue diving through Dream Theater because I find them to be such an interesting band. I also listened to Musik's Lunatic Harness. I'm the third person here to get around to this sort of IDM staple. Again, I really dug it. I think I feel about the same about these three records. They're really good. Not quite great, but it wouldn't take much to make them great. Yeah, I really dug this. I found it to be really engaging and really, I don't have much interesting to say about these records, but I did really enjoy them. I thought that it started particularly strong as well. I really liked the 1-2 punch of Brace Yourself, Jason, and Hasty Boom Alert.
Yeah.
I thought that the My Little Beautiful and the Secret Steer thing and two-part in the middle were great as well. Yeah, this record definitely does have a bit of a drop-off towards the end, but it wasn't as drastic as I was anticipating. There's really only one song on here that I think is outright bad, which is Wannabe, which is just really dumb.
No, that I would say Wannabe and London I don't care for.
I didn't mind London. I thought London was all right, but yeah, certainly it's certainly the first half of the record is really strong. But still, I still would wholeheartedly recommend it. It's a very good album. Just another one of those victims, like Vapor Trails and Awake of CD era bloat, but can't complain too much. I also want to shout out, I re-listened to a fantastic sort of abstract hip hop record called Paraffin by the hip hop duo Arm & Hammer, who is made up of Billy Woods, who you may know from
Baking Soda.
Yep.
Because they're Arm & Hammer.
Yeah.
Esther Joel.
Funny stuff.
I mean, you're not wrong. Yeah, so anyway, this duo is made up of Billy Woods, who you may know from his solo work, and Elucid, two incredibly talented rappers. The reason why I revisited this record is because they are coming out with a new record next month that I'm very excited for. They put out a really good record last year as well, called Shrines, that I strongly recommend. But yeah, these two guys are incredibly talented rappers. Like Billy Wood's solo career probably means he's a little more well known than Elucid, but I would argue that Elucid's maybe even the better rapper of the two. Incredible. The instruments, the beats on this record and the production is outstanding. The lyrics are very abstract, it's difficult to pass, but also quite topical in dealing with themes of blackness in America. It's like a very confrontational album, but it's not a very direct album. So that there is being confrontational through the very kind of abstract lyricism of these two MCs makes for quite a heady experience. But I really dug it and I highly recommend it. It's probably slightly better than Shrines, but they're both really great albums. Would recommend. Also want to shout out, I listened to the new Cloud Nothings album, The Shadow I Remember. Cloud Nothings are sort of like, they started off as a kind of a dream pop, power pop band, but they very quickly changed their sound quite dramatically and became more emo influenced punk. And with 2012's singular and great record, Attack on Memory, which is very beloved and was produced by Steve Albini. They've released a string of great records ever since. They've never dropped off, in my opinion, although general audiences have lost interest. But they reunited with Steve Albini to produce this new record, which is just a really solid slice of that emo punk. It's not going to change the world. It's not particularly inventive or groundbreaking, but it is very hard hitting. I want to shout out in particular this band's drummer, Jason Gerich, who is an absolute, he's the secret weapon of this band. Like, his drumming is outstanding, incredibly pummeling, incredibly versatile. If you come away from anything listening to a Cloud Nothings record, especially the later records where he's really kind of fleshed out and finessed his style, the thing you come away from in particular is his drumming. But also Dylan Baldy, the band's frontman, is really, really, really great, like almost just instinctively great at writing strong hooks. And that's what makes them such a compelling band. So it's not a great record, but it's a very good one that I would still recommend. And yeah, I think that's basically all I want to talk about.
Right.
All
So,
Okay, so we kick off then with our first main review today, which is of Black Dresses. May they rest in peace. Their new album. And it's, I say that because as Black Dresses fans, general listeners will probably know, they broke up they dissolved as an act quite dramatically shortly after the release of their last album, Peaceful of Hell, which was one of the very first albums that we ever reviewed on this podcast. And the reason that they broke up was because one of their early songs, which dealt very frankly with child sexual abuse, became a TikTok meme, and that led to and they were very upset about this, and they asked people to stop doing this. But then they got basically harassed and decided, nah, fuck this. Black Dresses is no more. And so we all believed that Peaceful as Hell would be their last record, even though they've continued working together on other projects. Least of all the upcoming Backwash record, which we're all obviously very excited for. But then they just kind of surprise dropped this on us, Forever in Your Heart, on Valentine's Day. And it's notable. I bring up this kind of band history because when they released it, they said, we are still no longer a band, but we have decided to keep releasing albums, which I think is...
What the fuck does that mean?
I think it's
Can this band do something for once that makes sense to me? Please.
I don't think that they will. But
No.
I think that's a really kind of funny and smart way of sort of getting around people trying to force this narrative on the band. So yeah, but anyway, the record has got plenty of things to be said about it. Yeah, I think I've probably given enough context. Does anyone have a strong urge to dive into their thoughts on this record? Jake, I noticed you put your hand up.
I would. As long time real ones remember, you've been watching since day one. People know that we covered the Peaceful as Hell when it came out because we were like, yo, this would be an interesting release to talk about. And it was quite divisive for the podcast, honestly. There was a varying range of reactions, myself very much included. I was just sort of very split down the middle and didn't really know what to make of it. And unfortunately, I'm still very much in the same camp as that. It's like I just sort of tried to come back to it over and over and over again. And it's just, it's not the record for me. But as I alluded to with me going back and listening to Love and Affection for Stupid Little Bitches, I was like, yo, this record kind of slaps. So I'm in a weird precarious area where it's just like, oh, it seems to be that Peaceful of Hell is just really the only one of these that I just didn't get along with, huh? And so I didn't know that beforehand. So, when they dropped this, I was like, oh, I guess we'll cover this. Guess I'll listen to it. So, it's not like I really expected this to be very possibly my favorite industrial record release since 9 Inch Nails' The Fragile. And yet, I am here, and I am reporting as such. Because, yeah.
We're here. We're clear.
Get used to it,
Really?
motherfucker. I mean, to be honest, like this just floored the shit out of me. Like it's from the very moment this album begins, I was just like, oh, so this is what we're doing then, huh? And I gotta tell you, like, as somebody who just, you know, I didn't know what to make of the last record, and I wasn't sure, just like, I wasn't really just sure how to engage with them as a band. I can tell you that this is also an album that it's just like, if you get along with other industrial type shit, this is an excellent album to hop on board with, because I think it's also sort of, I actually think Mike the Snare put out a video today where he briefly talked about this record and said that this album is like the perfect meeting point of being like super duper like confrontational and like unwelcoming, but also the perfect way to get into black dresses. And I couldn't agree with him more. Like I think the opener, Peace Sign, is just this incredible fucking blistering opener that just absolutely, like, the sort of blaring synths that sort of introduced the vocals, these incredibly like surreal lyrics just sort of burning this into your head, and there's this sort of refrain that Devi goes into that I think is sort of the attitude of this project, which is you know, can we make something beautiful with no hope? Which I think is an interesting like topic to tackle this from, especially like they do go into that. There's sort of mentions of like, not like the world we live in as in current year, but the world we live in from a standpoint of like, specifically on the song later called We'll Figure It Out, where there's sort of an acknowledgement of like things going to hell and things being the apocalypse and like the leftover trash heap that we have been given by the previous generation and just having to wallow and deal with it. And a lot of that is on here. It keeps throwing me for a loop. This is a record that just, with every single track, it is hitting me with something completely different that I didn't know that I wanted. I also just think there's these little tiny tinges in the production that just make so many tiny moments of personality shine through that I fucking adore. There's these moments where I think it's Ada's vocals on the first track where it's either, well, nah, I can't remember which one of them it is, but there's like this a little tiny electronic manipulation where they say, can we make something beautiful with no hope? And it like trails off in the word hope and goes like, pew! Yeah, it sounds like a video game sound effect. And I'm like, this is massaging something in my head that like nothing else hits, because it's just, I love this tiny little sound effect. And that's something that I love that they improved on, I think, dramatically from Peaceful as Hell, is they just put in these little like moments of interplay between Ada and Devi that just sort of lets you like remind you that they're friends and that they're just having a good time putting this music together. Like there's one point where just Ada goes like really hard with these like insane black metal screams on one track, and then it's just like, hey, are you okay? And she's just like, yeah, I'm fine. It's really cute. I really love that.
I just want to highlight one instance of this, which is at the end of the track Silver Bells, where one of them goes, I need someone to spin here.
Yeah, and then you hear and then it cuts off, and I'm just like, you were about to say like my mouth, you motherfucker. I knew what you were doing. It's really funny.
Nasty.
It's a bit. But there are just points too where like they are going, like even on the lyric sheet, which, by the way, imperative for this album. I think it's an exquisitely written album. Like just on a lyric by lyric basis, there's moments where they are screaming and growling and making indistinguishable noises that even the lyric sheet is just like noises. It's like, I don't fucking know, man. They're just saying things, and like that raw animal primal aggression comes from a very, very real place, especially once you dig into the core of what this album is about. And I love the next track, Concrete Bubble, which is also like, it's basically going hard in the same way that the last one went, but it's sort of takes a minute to get started, where it's got like those clattering drums at the beginning where it's like boom, 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 and it fucking shreds. And holy shit, the guitar work on this album, oh my god, which one of them does it? Because like awards, holy shit, it's so good. Like the sort of riff that comes in with the one of my favorite lyrics, which is the rock your body like a cattle plague.
Ouch.
It's fucking hard, dude. And then there's like the immediate like verse here, watch the death like a shit lib sitting on your hands, never did shit, never known shit, never done shit for anyone ever. And I'm just like, man, I don't know if you've been following the news in America politically this week, but that verse there is just like, yeah, this is
That's
what
the bit.
Yeah, it's just like, this is it. This is why I'm angry, and I hate it.
Yeah,
and
I'm pretty sure most of this record was, if not all of it, was actually recorded last year. So it's like one of those things where it's like always relevant.
Oh yeah, and it does so in a really just smart way, in a really like personal way. We sort of talked about that with the Steven Wilson record of just like, you have a chance of taking subject matter and like depersonalizing it, which Ada and Devi do not do. Then there's also more insane screaming on here, which talks about the 10,000 eyes and broken lenses seeing different lives. It's just like the concrete bubble of the title suggesting that it's just like living in this insulated environment, this echo chamber that people are just sort of like living in, but also attacking it from a point of view of just like, oh, it's nice that you can live in this little bubble. Meanwhile, we're out here and we're actually facing consequences, which is again another theme that the record tackles.
Yeah, there's a lot of feeling sort of this is probably a lockdown record. There's a lot of feeling trapped inside something on this record.
It's in, I can't remember which one, but it's in the like final third of the record where there's this sort of part where I think it's also kind of addressing the sort of what happened to dissolve the band originally, when they say something about like oh, what you think what I've been through and what I've lived through is edgy. Well, that's nice for you. You must have a nice life.
Yeah.
And it's just like, fucking get them. Get their ass.
It's worth, I think, mentioning at this point that a lot of these themes of obviously feeling trapped and obviously all of the things that they touch on the record, none of this is new for Black Dresses. It's all very much the sort of stuff that their music has always kind of been about. But I would say that more so than anything since Waste Isolation, this is probably the most purely cathartic record that they've made, in terms of just being regular, unfiltered howls of pain. And especially
catharsis is the name of the game, Tyler.
The song was Perfect Teeth, by the way.
Yeah.
An amazing song, if I don't say so myself. But it's like, you can, the lyrics, I agree, are great, and you should quote them, but it just reading out the lyrics doesn't quite capture the way that the delivery really makes it viscerally powerful, and the way it works with rhythm and performance just hammers at home.
It's like, it's an instrument just like everything else that's employed on here, and it does so like with complete and total expertise, and to the point where it's like, Saoirse, you even mentioned a lot about Peaceful as Hell, as the like the vocal deliveries on them, some of them feel like intentionally kind of cheeky, intentionally like theatrically, like performatively, even like feminine on occasion. And I think that's totally the case here. Like, I think they really play that up, especially when they sort of touch on subjects that are inherently sort of linked to that, like dysphoria and what have you, which again, catharsis, thy name is Black Dresses, which is they do immediately start to throw you for a loop after the first two songs, which are, they're largely like, this is what the album is. But then you get into Bulldozer, which is just like, I too have heard Closer by 9 Inch Nails and love that song. And then they made the song, and boy howdy, what a hook on this track, huh?
I want this song to do the title sequence for a David Fincher film.
I mean, but seriously,
Yeah,
that
right.
would rule. I think that like this song too is sort of hinting at something greater too, is that it's just like, again, I read this song at least as being about like very visceral dysphoria, which is what at least what it causes in me when I listen about it. Just the sort of like the very explicit lyrics, and then combined with the sort of later third of the track, which is I wanted to be like the other girls, now I'm just like the other girls, repeated over and over again, and just sort of like repeat these repetitious sort of these lyrics sort of comparing comparing specific genitalia to like a bulldozer drooling and grinding like a blown out speaker, and it's just like, holy fuck. I mean, like, I know you're not okay, but like, are you, like, guys? And then you go right back into Heaven, which, holy shit, what a fucking rager. The refrain of "I love feeling pain makes me feel like I'm going to heaven." I can't not headbang to this shit, because not only it's just like I went to Catholic school, so I know what this feels like, but also just and then there's like, it sort of breaks in with like this shoegazy guitar thing that happens, and then it's like the night explodes into the light from a shooting star. There's like this super it's just a complete paradigm shift in terms of not only what the song was lyrically and sonically, but just like the attitude in which it's delivered, and it just keeps switching it over and over and over again, and it's great. And there's so many great like moments of lyrical delivery here. It's easy to be disillusioned when you don't know who you are part in the very end is fantastic. Tiny Ball, another place where it's sort of, again, throws you for a loop. It's really, you can like hear them begin the recording process in the studio on this like a little click, and then the sort of track starts going, and it's just like they're like clicking together like wooden blocks or something. Everything's inside a tiny ball. And I'm just like, well, this is cute, but also what? And then eventually the song becomes like a more song proper, and then like lyrically it's just like, oh, okay, we're gonna go here, all right. And then we have a song like Silver Bells, which this is where it's just like, yeah, these songs go really hard, but they also talk about depression, and it makes me go, I too am tired, am out of breath, and scared of everything that's left. Me too. I hate it. This is the moment where they ask each other if they're okay, which again, super cute, and also followed immediately by the roar of motherfucker yeah, which the screaming, it's really good. Rage Quitted has this sort of more forlorn opening segment, and then it has like the vocals that are a little bit more overtly sung here with the "I don't want to do this anymore" part, and it's really fucking like, the structure of all of these songs is fucking perfect, but I think that it really, really shows its hand on a lot of the songs in the second half. And then there's songs like Waiting for Tomorrow, which just like, this is a song that I feel like wouldn't be out of place on one of their earlier records. Not quite on Love and Affection, or maybe on like Waste Isolation, but just again, the repetition of waiting for tomorrow, waiting for tomorrow, waiting for tomorrow, feeling like shit. The hooks are everywhere. The hooks are everywhere. And I, for one, welcome it. Then there's also like, there's a moment on Gone in an Instant where it talks about like crumbling to pieces in blooming fractal blood. And I'm just like, what in the hell? When is the last time I have heard this insane fucking crazy ass fever dream fucking lyrics that have quite matched this game of like being weird, but also like specifically vivid and emotionally poignant? And
Cedric Bixler's Zavala.
You, my friend, have cracked the code. There's also songs like Understanding, which I think is just like a deeply, deeply poignant song. It's just very self-evaluative and examining, and just sort of talks about the idea of understanding people and not understanding their pain, because pain is singular and it can't be this universal thing that everyone gets. And it's like the notion of empathy in that way is like so smartly put in a way that I really like haven't been put before. And I'm just like, yeah, you know, you're right. You're completely right about this. And Perfect Teeth, I also think, is a song that sort of hints at like a, you know, the other, like, just sort of there being I don't want to say this in like a way that sounds like condescending or selling them short or something, but it's just like there's an anger towards people who just sort of have it inherently easier or better. Just people, not even people who are just like, like cis people or whatever, but it's like people in a better financial situation, people who have easier mental health. There's just sort of a general, like, like, fuck you guys, you have it so fucking easy. And it's like,
or even like the song was written about a specific one of those things.
Yeah,
anyone can bring their own baggage to it and it will resonate.
And also there's sort of a punching up thing of just, there's mentions of people looking down on them and like, just seeing them as lesser, and them just being like, you know what, well, fuck you for doing this. And it's just like, yes, you should say it. And I don't know, the flow here, especially in like this final third of like the run here of Perfect Teeth through Can't Keep It Together, is just like one of the best track runs I've heard on this fucking podcast. There's so many examples of their personality shining through in a way that feels more fully formed than it did on Peaceful as Hell, or even on Love and Affection for Stupid Little Bitches. But also these musical ideas that I always was like, that like half gravitated towards me, but also would just like veer in another direction and immediately lose me on Peaceful as Hell. Those moments never come here. I am always completely and fully on board, and the sound is so full, it's so aggressive, it's so raw, but it's never enough to overpower you. I mean, it is in some respects, but it's not like in a way that's off-putting, because it'll sketch into like something that's a little bit more easier to palate, I think, sonically. So they have like a really good grasp as to like structuring their records. And I also I'll shout out Can't Keep It Together as being a fucking phenomenal closing track that is probably features the best writing on the entire album. And like it sort of imbues me with a simultaneous like, this is a cool like note to go out on for your album, but also like the band being in their weird undead state, it makes me be like, I really want you guys to keep making music like this. Like, and I know they will, regardless of whether or not Black Dresses as a project continues, because of their like incredibly prolific catalogs individually and collaboratively with other people. But like, this just epitomizes what I think both of them are capable of in so many different ways, and combines it so flawlessly that I'm just like, this moniker I feel like could mean something to people, because you are striking an emotional chord with me and clearly with other people that is like, this is a niche that is previously going unfulfilled by lots of like artists that are sort of like a bit more, I won't say like grassroots, but they've like clearly built themselves up. Artists like Black Dresses, artists like Backwash, who are just, they have something raw that's just really missing right now that like no one else is fulfilling. And it just makes me excited for like the future of this particular musical sphere, because it's like something that I get and understand, but also it takes it a step further and just fucking evolves in a very, very musical, like easy to recognize way, in a sense that like, if you preferred their more eclectic shit before, this may not be for you. But as somebody who just really likes the foundations and the fundamentals of the genres that they're pulling from, this release is the ticket. It's it, and it makes me happy and excited and feels cathartic and sad, but also like it feels empowering. And God, I fucking love it. I've listened to it like 7 times this week. I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I agree.
To the surprise of no one.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Baffling.
I don't want
Absurd.
to.
Penis.
I loved Peaceful as Hell. And I went back and listened to other Black Dresses records after that, and I loved them all. But this is my favorite Black Dresses record by quite a long chalk. Like my favorite song of last year and my favorite song from Peaceful as Hell was Creep You. And I think that is the song that really heralds sort of the musical direction this album has taken, which is a lot of stuff Black Dresses have already explored, but just the level of like musical ambition in terms of the amount of influences we're going to pull, the variety of tones and textures we're going to hit, it's leaps and bounds from what they've done previously, in my opinion.
Yeah, the texture, that was something I didn't get at, but the texture of this fucking like album is just ooh.
Like there's more like metal on this record, there's more God, the amount of shoegaze on this record, Jesus Christ. And it's just Ada, I feel, has much more freedom to bring in sort of the metal fascination she's expressed on projects like Crisis Sigil on this record. Like Peace Sign goes from a really like heavy, glitchy, thunderous, doomy intro, and the guitars then almost immediately go to almost like a black metal place, while singing something like a peace sign burning like a vision from God. Obviously referencing the cover of Peaceful as Hell, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's just it's this strange glitch pop with like black metal and shoegazy guitars. Like if you're a fan of Death Haven, you'll like this song. And then it immediately goes into this like glitch metal breakdown with the snare drum doing a march rhythm and going, can we make something beautiful with no and it's with no hope, and it brings you into a loop and you feel like you're in a death spiral, where the end of the line is leading you into the next line that's the same, and it repeats and repeats, and it's just incredible. I love the line where they say that no one would remember us in a better world, because that kind of like epitomizes, I think, what the Black Dresses project is kind of doing, which is reflecting the world and adding something like beautiful to it whilst acknowledging its ugliness, because everything they do is incredibly uncompromising, both in respects to how intense it is, but also how like sweet and good-natured and hooky and poppy and like satisfying and warm it is.
Like all the anger here is basically anger that's just like, hey, why aren't you being nice, fuckface? It's just nice. Like I feel this in my soul.
I find it a little more like, you know, this is the same thing that we're saying, but it's more like, why are you making me be mean?
Yes, right. Yes, exactly, Morgan.
I don't want to be. Stop it.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm gonna try not to be redundant because Jake stole so many of my talking points, it's offensive. But I love
you bitch, you rat bastard.
Concrete Bubble especially is one of the lyrical highlights on this record for me. You already talked about the line "rock your body like a cattle plague," which is just, where did this come from in your mind? And I want you to show me the place in your mind this came from, so that I can then never go back there. But
I want a little peek. I want a little peek. I want to look at
exactly. The drumming on the song is insane. Really carries the pace of the song through. It breaks down and then builds again to this like heavy 9 Inch Nails style industrial riff with big shoegaze fuzz. Yeah, and I love it. Bulldozer is when they dropped the live stream with the visualizer to this record, when they announced it was happening, and I was already like over the moon. So it's like, there's a record now, and like every song has video I can watch live with everyone now. I will do this. And then when Bulldozer came, it was like, this sounds like fucking nothing you've done since like your first record. And it's
pussy like a bulldozer.
It is just like one of the most provocative songs I've like ever heard, and it's like scary and horny and intense and very dysphoric, and it's just like really confronting you with a real visceral honesty. And it's so stripped back in its instrumentation until it gets like a groove going. It's just I feel like I don't want to be here, but I should be here because this is like a truth you should see. But also, I'm scared. I need a hug, Mum.
And then heaven, which is not a hug.
No. This is one of the best tracks on the record for melding the harsh noise and harmony and melody, like at the same time, doing them both at once and not separately. It's got a riff that really, really, really reminded me of "Kill It in the Morning" by the Twilight Sad.
Ooh, good
nice
comp.
Shout. Nice shout.
Thank you. And I vibed with it. And over this riff, saying like she is running away from a slasher villain and screaming into the void. I love being in pain. It makes me feel like I'm going to heaven. I love breaking the waves.
The delivery of that too is just so fucking feverish. She's just like, I
feel like I'm going to heaven.
I feel like I'm going to heaven. And I'm just like, hon, do you like need like do you need like a Capri Sun? Do you need something?
And the way like half the final chorus is overtaken with Ada screaming her fucking lungs out. It's incredible. To go from heaven into Tiny Ball, which is such a stripped back song, where like you can hear the start of other audio tracks because other bits of background noise comes in. Like when I record, that's the kind of stuff I actively try to hide, but they're here, like it's like Brecht. It's like, look, you're listening to a constructed recording, you know. And the metronome feels like it's this like very basic automated programming behind kids music, and it's just it feels like a metronome, and it's just crazy lo-fi, and it feels so intimate and lovely, but also like the lyrics being as dark as they are in the song, saying that everything's a tiny ball of fear
and pain.
Thank you. It doesn't feel like they're out to scare you or make you feel sad. It feels like they're saying, come into our world, it's okay. Like, we have hot chocolate and cookies, right? And we're going to talk.
Yeah, it's like a preschool teacher, like singing songs, like sort of like everything's inside a tiny ball.
Right, but like,
yeah,
it's the honesty that makes it such a wonderful song.
Yeah,
because amongst this like hellscape, there's this one song that basically exists to go, you know, I feel your pain. It's okay. No, and what Silver Bells, I'm going to say, when I first watched the stream late at night, staying up to watch this with the small world of Tyler and Laura, this
my favorite sitcom.
The Small World of Tyler and Laura, tonight at 9 p.m. on CBS.
Ding dong.
We all live inside a tiny ball.
But no, this absolutely blew me away when that happened. It's just the noise and the melody do something to me. They walk a delicate tightrope here, and they go straight into Rage Quitted, which has an awesome groove and melody and texture, and the lyrics. I love the way the lyrics incorporate sort of ways of looking back at their career and the events of where they've sort of come up to this point. And like the fact is, Backwash, which had guitars from Ada and vocals from Devi, I think, was one of the very first things we did. And then we did Peaceful as Hell, and we've since covered Crisis Sigil. It feels like Black Dresses have lived with us for the length of doing this, and they've sort of been, even while they've been broken up, they've sort of just been there. You know?
Well, like it's interesting because this is only the second artist that we've covered two projects from, new release wise, anyway. after Autechre, but the Autechre was different because those were two records that were kind of like part of the same thing. Whereas
they were
this
done.
This is the
Taylor
first.
Swift as well, I think.
Oh shit, you're right, Taylor Swift. Sorry. Well, even then, those two
Well,
records.
still.
It's the same situation, yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the first time we've kind of covered a new era for an artist after covering the last one in real time.
That's absolutely right. And you're so right. This feels like a new era because they're working as a band totally differently, but also it feels like a sonic leap forward for what they're doing. And it really makes me excited for what they're going to do in the future because they're just incorporating so much more into their identity as a band. And it's just really exciting to see what they're going to do in the future.
So, forever in your heart. So, yeah, the opener here, Peace Sign, starts us off with this kind of really heavy, stuttering electronic line to kind of get you into the record. And immediately I noticed there's just a very big improvement in my eyes over Peaceful as Hell. That being, I think there's a really great chemistry between Devi and Rook here. Devi's vocal deliveries are typically a bit more reserved and Rook goes really nuts. Reserved, of course, is a relative term in the context of Forever in Your Heart. But then we get into Concrete Bubble, which has this absolute just clattering beat. And towards the middle of this song, I'm almost reminded of something Shinsei Kamate-chan would do on Sumane. It's just a very exciting sound to it. And, then we've got Bulldozer, which is a noticeable change of pace and it gets right to the heart of my favorite aspect of this record. If the vocal chemistry was not that already, that being, I really like how this project feels like every track is so distinct from one another. It feels like everything here has a purpose. It all kind of fits together in a very satisfying way. Tiny Ball presents us like yet another curveball, being very minimal. You can even hear the studio ambiance in here. And lyric-wise, I think this presents a really great sense of being trapped, which is fitting for the time. But this is the record I want to highlight, and I think should be held up as the example of precisely what a quote-unquote quarantine album should be. That being a record which has themes and emotions which are so universal to the human experience about isolation that you shouldn't be able to tie it down to a time period. It shouldn't be a novelty. It shouldn't be a relic. It makes
Shouldn't
shit.
be fucking sitting in my house. Don't like my face mask. Like every,
Yeah.
Right, Rivers Cuomo.
No, that's funny because OK Human is in my notes. It's in my notes about that is the antithesis of this record in a not direct way, obviously, but a roundabout way at my point. Like Waiting for Tomorrow has infinitely more resonance than fucking Alu Gobi. Yeah.
Not difficult.
I was going to say, it's a fucking feat you managed to remember that song's name, August. I want to congratulate you.
Most of the Mogwai tracks that we're reviewing in the next segment have more lyrical resonance than Alu Gobi, and they're fucking instrumentals.
The one song on the Mogwai record where you can hear singing, but it's like so vocoded that it's illegible. Has more lyrical substance than LOGB.
And I can say like there's a couple exceptions on the track list where I feel things aren't as memorable as they could be, or like as up to the standards of the rest of the record. But notably, I was kind of shocked that I went into this fully expecting to just read you my notes for Peaceful as Hell again.
Right.
And
Yeah, I think my first words were at the announcement of this were "son of a bitch." So
No, yeah, I was just kind of taken aback by this. I guess you could say I'm black. Wait, no, not that. A black dresses fan. Uh,
come on, son.
You sneaky motherfucker. Oh, that's fantastic. I love that we did the same thing where we were just like, oh, fucking, now I'm going to have to do this thing again where I have to be like, I don't fucking know what this music is. Because that's the worst kind of reaction that I have to something. And
Yeah,
I just like,
that's the thing about it is if, Devi or Ada Rook happen to be watching this at some point in time, I want to make it clear that it's because you make me feel stupid. It's not because your music is bad. It's because it makes me feel like a Philistine. So take that as you will.
oh yeah, that Philistine deep cut.
Give it to me, you Philistine.
Philistines of the world. So is that all you wanted to say, August?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to make things brief. I didn't have a bunch of like hyper specific notes.
Cool. And I will be comparatively brief as well because a lot of the things I wanted to touch on have already been said. One thing I want to highlight is we talk about how, or as Black Dresses fans, Sergio and I, and now Jake, and I suppose August as well, have talked about how it's exciting to get a project like this that you really connect with and you look forward to what they continue to do next. But it's maybe not difficult to forget at the moment, considering how close this record is to the last one. But these are two incredibly prolific musicians. They have upwards of 3 or 4 ongoing side projects that are still active. Rook put out, I think, 2 albums last year, solo records. In a recent episode, I shouted out her solo record, Shed Blood, which I think is still my favorite thing that either of them have their name attached to.
Yeah, and while we've covered a lot of what they've done, like Devi did a collaboration record with K Today, another really exciting trance artist last year.
That's right as well. So you've got these artists who are connected in this kind of related world of music who are all kind of doing their own niche. And there obviously are definitely signs of Ada and Devi's, who are like echoes of their solo styles and Black Dresses, but it still is this very distinct project that has a very distinct sound to me. And when you listen to a Black Dresses record, it's immediately identifiable as a Black Dresses record. And so, yeah, you can imagine I was pretty, I felt surprised and then like immediately like, oh, why am I surprised when this album happened? And it's, yeah, I don't have any real hot takes. It's a really great record. I'm not as in love with it personally as I am in love with Peaceful as Hell, but it's really a slim margin between the two. There's just so much about this record that is so immediate and so captivating and so raw. And obviously those are qualities that Black Dresses imbue in everything they release, but it feels particularly pointed here because it's like the suddenness of this project. It's kind of emergence from being effectively defunct as a band gives it this real sense of kind of like resurrection of like electric, back from the dead sort of thing. And obviously their breakup is not something that was orchestrated to create a narrative around this record. It has, and that's why I wanted to talk about it at the head of this segment to give some clarity. That breakup happened for some very unfortunate reasons, and we're just very lucky that they felt like they had the inspiration to continue making music and to give us this. Yeah, and you're right, and Saoirse's right. You can hear echoes of what Rook's doing in Crisis Sigil with some of the pure raw guitar noise on this record. Peace Sign and Concrete Bubble are very loud and abrasive tracks that also demonstrate their fantastic talent for hook writing. I have to say that a lot of the guitar riffs and industrial production on this record recalls 90s Nine Inch Nails to me. I think intentionally. then there are some specific points on the record that I'll get to where that comparison is particularly pointed. But I also think that, as has already been touched on, this is maybe the most consistently strong and evocative lyricism of any Black Dresses record. This lyrical style that Ada and Devi have dabbled with has often been kind of like, this really immediate kind of chunks of raw feeling, but they're more sort of fleshed out in terms of the lyricism on this record, I think, into sort of more abstract phrases, some of which Jake's already mentioned. But you also get this real directness in a lot of the writing as well, that I think is one of the greatest strengths of the duo. Particularly, I love the lines in Concrete Bubble. I know it's not easy for anyone. We're all on a clear light hell trip, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Just don't come anywhere near me and we'll be okay. I don't want to see anyone's face. I'm dealing with my own shit right now. You can deal with your shit somewhere else. So it's this idea of like, we are all unified in a sense, but also like, I need to be left alone. I need to have my privacy and my space respected, which is obviously a pointed topic considering the nature of their breakup. One thing I want to shout out about this record as well, it's great to see an increasing, obviously between the two of them, they've made dozens of records, but it's great to see an increasing vocal confidence from both of them, and vocal versatility. I think that as great as Devi is, I think Rook really steals the show on this record with her vocal performances and her vocal versatility as well. I think
I would almost actually, to bring it back to last episode, compare it to like how much Joba steals the show on Iridescence,
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a real sense of growing confidence, and just not necessarily growing confidence, because she's always been very confident within her group, but just a growing kind of ambition. And it's like, for instance, on I think Concrete Bubble as well, you get this entire verse where she just kind of screams in these kind of like warbled goblin vocals that appear nowhere else on the record, that are so disconcerting that I wondered if they were kind of like affected, but I'm pretty sure they're not affected. They're
changing my gender to goblin.
Yeah, I didn't know how to describe them, and goblin kept coming to mind. It doesn't really sound like a goblin, but I don't know what else it sounds like. Ada's, and it's interesting to note this because Ada's normally, I think, the most tuneful of the two in terms of like actual singing talent and ability, but she really has some harrowing screams on this record. Throughout, on just about nearly every track, she's really giving these real guttural, hell-bent screamed vocals that I think are really great. I mean, anyone can scream. It's very difficult to scream well in music and have it carry a genuine effect rather than just sound like someone screaming. And then I think Bulldozer is a fantastic track. I really love the distorted bass on this track. It lies beneath everything and it sounds fucking unearthly. This is a really seedy, eerie song, and even those refrains of "pussy like a bulldozer," "pussy like a blown out speaker," and "I wanted to be like the other girls, now I'm just like the other girls." Great refrains, but even those lines sound urgent and threatening, and whispered, despite the fact that there are these anthemic refrains.
It reminds me of stuff like stuff on Reptile, on Downward Spiral. It sounds very primal and sort of.
I actually have a very specific reference to that song, funnily enough, later in my notes that I'll get to. But yes, great observation. I love the record continues really strongly. I love the stabs of noise at the opening of Heaven, which is a really great track, I think. I love the way that they're thoughtfully and tactfully deployed in the song. They're not all throughout it. They're just in certain parts of it that kind of jar you at just the right moments. The track has a really disgusting beat, and it reminds you why these two musicians are at the forefront of their musical niche. Because by the time that Heaven, which has been harrowing up to this point, just dissolves into this blissful chorus, it's not whiplash inducing like it would have been on a previous record like Peaceful as Hell, for instance, but it feels like an extension of the seedier verses, like the song is kind of drawing the curtains on itself. A great song. The broken, stumbling beat of Tiny Ball actually reminded me of Crystal Castles, but like Crystal Castles on Valium. Um, I do think that there is some songs in the midsection of the record that I'm not quite as huge on as the songs on the sort of bookends, but there's nothing outright weak on here, I don't think. I love the line in Silver Bells, which is another highlight track of mine. On a clear and cloudless day, it feels like the atmosphere is stitched together by everyone's pain, which is just a really great line. I don't have much to add to it. I just love that. One thing I want to add about this track, Rage Quitted, is that I love the way that the duo incorporate this vaguely sort of trap hi-hat thing in this song that is not so like it's quite subtle. It's not like a full hi-hat pattern. It's just kind of like part of one, but it has that trap texture, and I really thought that was a surprising musical addition that worked really well. It was really well integrated. You get some auto tune on this track as well that I think adds some nice color to the vocals, and you also get these really serene synths as well. There's this melting pot of strange intermingling sounds that it's really impressive work as well as they do. Waiting for Tomorrow, I love the way that there's parts of this track where the vocals are kind of compressed and almost like bit crushed. They sound like they've been like fed through a like a 144p quality replay thing, and they've just been recorded through that.
What's the audio equivalent of a wood chipper?
Yeah, but it's like a wood chipper underwater. It's a really interesting texture that I'm glad it's only at this point on the record, but it's worth shouting out. I do think, just to be a bit of a contrarian, I think that the hook on this song is a little too repetitive for my taste personally, but it's obviously a song that's got some good meaning. And I like the way that the song is kind of quite subtle up to a certain point instrumentally, and then just kind of explodes into an industrial clatter at the chorus. I think the album hits a real stride again once you get to We'll Figure It Out. I love the way this track has a 4 on the floor beat, but just layers on distorted guitar piece by piece as that vocal refrain, which you've already said, I'm breaking it, it's broken, kind of just gradually intensifies more and more. I think the best song on the record is Understanding, which is, I think, one of the most commanding and impressive tracks the duo have ever released. It has a hammering industrial beat that immediately, the very first time I heard it, reminded me of the beat in Reptile by Nine Inch Nails. It's a very similar quality, but except this is kind of like faster. And I loved that even the melodic tones that hang in the background of the chorus on this track sound like something out of a Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross score. So that's, I think, a neat piece of influence that I really love, because the girls completely make it their own, and it's so deeply intertwined with other stuff that is entirely novel. I think as well that this track gives maybe the best lyrical passage on the whole record, which are the lines, I tried to offer up my pain to be understood, but I don't think it's my pain that can be understood or needs understanding. There's not a lot of pain in the world that makes any sense. Maybe people need to be understood instead. And I don't need to add anything to that. That's just perfect. But yeah, I think that's a top 5 Black Dresses song, hands down. Amazing. And then you get into Perfect Teeth, which is almost as great. A stellar song. Jake's already highlighted that lyrical passage. If that's your idea of being edgy, I guess that's good for you. You must have a nice life, which is clearly I think maybe the most overt allusion to the events surrounding their breakup last year. I like the way that the duo don't necessarily feel the need to dig into that in an overt way, but it's kind of informing a lot of the
overt allusion to Dan Barrett.
I made that joke when you were here.
God damn it! Yeah. No, I'm gonna jump off.
I can't imagine they weren't aware that was something that would come out of that reference.
If these two have not heard Deaf Consciousness individually at least 5 times, I would be shocked.
They would listen to it and then they would start making different music.
I think that Perfect Teeth as well is also home to one of the most harrowing moments on any song the duo have ever put out, which is the part of the song where Devi's just kind of like singing over and over again about perfect teeth fucking chewing on me. The way she sings that is just so viscerally upsetting to me that I have to like calm myself.
And I love, even though I don't think the song's particularly about this, I love the way that evokes the idea of like beauty standards, especially coming from a trans perspective, and that it's like there are some things that like are associated with a platonic ideal of a successful transition, I suppose, to gnaw away at you.
Yeah, that's totally I'm sure subtext that they would not dispute. I also love the blown out stretching synth arpeggios on the very underrated Zero Ultra. Those sound, and those specific synth arpeggios sound very Sophie to me. But the song itself growls and shrieks in a way that's pure Black Dresses. And I love that kind of, there's an early sort of fake out ending early on that I think is really cute. I don't have a lot to say about Mistake. I think it's a nice breather, and it's also got some very poignant lyricism, specifically alluding to childhood trauma, which if you've listened to Black Dress's early records specifically, you'll know is something that Ada and Devi have both experienced. I love the way that the song Mistake, sort of the synth melody just kind of leads right into Can't Keep It Together, which is a sensational closer, maybe my favorite Black Dresses closer to date. I love the way that this song just builds and builds and has these rollicking, marching drums. And then I feel like I should know who performs the guitar solo at the end of this track, but I'm not sure. I suspect probably Ada, but I could be wrong. Either way, I want to shout it out because it's a really, really surprising moment that you just come through with this really pristine guitar solo. That is a very kind of new thing for them, or for Black Dresses anyway, but I love it. It's a great kind of little capstone on the record. And yeah, just a stellar effort. I think probably pretty comfortably my second favorite Black Dresses record yet. And yeah, I have no idea whether they will continue to make music or not, but obviously I'm there for whatever they do. In many ways, this triples my anticipation for the new Backwash record, considering that I think they're more heavily involved in that record than they even were on the last one. So that's going to be something to look out for.
At the very least, they'll have certainly been trading influences and ideas in the lead up to Backwash making that record. So their personality is, of course, going to be more in that, because they're obviously friends and will have shared a lot more with each other before each record has come out, you know.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting as well to see Backwash kind of take some of these sonic aesthetics and styles into the world of hip hop, because obviously the closest thing that we have to a real proper industrial hip hop band is Clipping, but they're very much their own thing. And I think the way that the music of Black Dresses in this particular industrial niche deals with particular things relating to identity is very unique and special. And I think seeing that infused with hip hop will be a really exciting thing.
Yeah, and of course Clipping are producing one of Backwash's songs on the new record.
Because of course they are.
Of course, right? But also Backwashers said very purposefully that this record is very purposefully less of like metal rap and more industrial rap compared to her last record.
Yeah, well, we're all going to be hyped to see
quivering with anticipation.
Yeah.
Anyway, Morgan.
Yeah.
Patient.
Yeah, all right.
What do I do when a pawn reaches into his chessboard? Promote it. Bam, out of rook.
Ada Rook, more like Ada Hook.
How long were you thinking on that one? How long did you have that in your back pocket?
30 seconds.
That's pretty good. I give you an A-.
Yeah.
So, Morgan, how did you find the experience of listening to Black Dresses Forever in Your Heart?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right, I'll tell you how I found it. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. So I'll list my one big hesitation at the start here, and it's just that I find some of the vocal stylings to be a bit. Look, I'll be blunt. I find some of them a bit fucking annoying. But a bit like with Peaceful as Hell and pretty much everything about that record, if you don't like something, it's not going to be there very long, so you can just wait for the next one. So I mean, it's really not a huge drawback. It didn't hinder my enjoyment of the record that much, because I really did enjoy it. I think easily the biggest plus it has going for it is wine
Dope.
burp. Is the production. The fact that this is both self-produced and an independent record is kind of staggering just listening to it, because like how did you do that? Who did you pay?
Why them guitars sound so good?
Yeah, why them all of it sound good? How'd that work? Yeah, I think it sounds pretty incredible. Up there with like any of the best industrial stuff of that time, or of this time, excuse me. So yeah, it's very good. I'm glad I like a Black Dresses record and I didn't have to fucking Philistine up the place.
I have to tell you, I'm also glad that you like this.
Yeah, is this the first unanimous hit of 2021?
I think it might well be, to be honest.
Fell
Yeah.
from the tree.
Yeah, that's true.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
That is true.
Yeah, we all did like
Transgirls.
that.
I was
Trans
gonna
girls
say,
stay winning.
I was gonna say.
So the
trans
listeners, trans
stay
people are
winning.
winning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait, the other unanimous hit was, of course, although even though you were not here for it because you made it, Saoirse.
So basically,
People stay
exactly
winning.
what you just said.
Oh,
Trans
it's
people
true.
stay winning.
Yeah.
Step it up, cis people.
Oh my
Jesus.
god, I'm
Fucking
that
losers.
it's such like Fell from the Tree and Black Dresses. It's just such amazing company to be in.
No.
Like,
I'm gonna be honest. Cis people need to start chopping off their dicks to make good music.
Well,
Or-
look, we're gonna have to walk back like everything we just said for the next segment, so
Yeah.
let's not
I mean,
not get
maybe.
too far ahead of ourselves.
All right, favorite tracks, ratings
yeah, and ratings
for the
please.
Black Dresses.
Let's
What
do
the fuck are
reverse jam.
Yeah, I
you
want to go
doing?
reverse as well. I want to go reverse as well.
Tyler's become a 90s rap hype
He's,
man.
he's become Connor for real from Popstar.
Yeah.
Oh
let's
my
go.
god.
Kiwi
Fucking
Vanilla
bad, yeah.
Ice.
All right, Tyler, your turn first.
Okay, sure. My three favorite tracks are I'm gonna say Concrete Bubble. I'm gonna say Understanding, my favorite track, and I'll also throw in fucking Bulldozer. And my
Nice.
least favorite track is probably Rage Quitted. And I give the album 8.5 out of 10.
Nice. Well, my favorite tracks, children, are We'll Figure It Out, Perfect Teeth, and Peace Sign. I don't give a shit. I don't have a least favorite track. I can give this record a 10 out of 10.
Yeah. My three favorites are Heaven, Gone in an Instant, and Understanding. My least favorite is Mistake. I'm feeling a 7.5. Apparently my rating
Nice.
for 2021 so far, because I've given it
Wow.
like 5 times.
Yeah, I did see.
Favorite tracks are gonna be Concrete Bubble, Bulldozer, and Waiting for Tomorrow. Least favorite, fucking, I guess, Mistake, and I'll give it an 8.
Nice.
That should be the right way because that's the way you can see Mr. Steve Buscemi.
How about you turn it on a side and it's an infinity out of 10?
Oh,
shit!
God.
How about you turn it? How about you turn it upside down and it's an 8 still?
How about I stick it up
Speaking
my
of high
ass?
scores, Jake, what do you think?
My 3 favorite tracks are Peace Sign, Heaven, and Understanding. Least favorite track, I don't particularly have one, and
Mhm.
I'm going to give the album a 9.5.
Oh, neat. Oh, so that's an 8.7
Ooh,
on
Ooh.
right. And I want
yeah.
the 2 records with an 8.7 are
I-
Go Farther in Lightness by Gang of Youths and Iridescence by Brockhampton.
Holy shit! Let's fucking go.
Also
Gay.
worth shouting out the absolute glow up of our average rating for this band, which I think Peaceful as Hell got a 7.1. So even though I still narrowly prefer that record, this is still a remarkable step up for in terms of appeal for these
Hey,
medals. So.
I would just like to point out before this record came out, I specifically said I was confident we would see a shifting in tastes with
did
this
say that.
record, and
Yeah.
you all doubted me.
Did we?
Did we?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that
I
just goes to
didn't.
show that we shouldn't doubt August.
So
It's true.
yeah, don't doubt me. My opinions are always correct.
So,
I probably called you a butthole or something.
Yeah, probably.
so our next album is by a group of small furry creatures that you shouldn't spill
Beat
water
after
on.
midnight.
Yeah.
Yes, Mogwai, the Scottish post-rock stalwarts.
Yes.
What?
What?
What do you mean? What?
Did you just say the Scottish post-rock Star Wars?
No.
No,
That's what it sounded like.
no, it didn't. It's the thing.
I have an
He
accent.
said,
Respect.
he said stalwarts
Okay.
with L's and T's.
Oh,
Welcome to the Racism and Tea podcast, where we
Let's just
colonialize
fucking
other
start over.
lands.
all right. Look. So
The album is
Hey,
called
So-
listen. There's only one colonialist here, and that's the English one.
So,
all I'm saying.
Mogwai's 10th record, legendary Scottish post-rock Death Stars. And we have an absolute... So these guys have been around since, if you listen to our opening segment where Morgan spoke briefly about their debut record, Young Team, you'll know that they're a very influential force in the burgeoning movement of post-rock in the 90s, specifically influential in the shift in that genre away from more kind of formless and exploratory stuff that like bands like Talk, Bark Psychosis were doing in the early 90s, and more towards a specific variant of that sound, which was focused on kind of building to these huge instrumental climaxes. And of course, the other bands that were kind of pivotal in this shift were of course Slint to a certain extent, who obviously predated Mogwai by some time, but also Godspeed You Black Emperor, who released their debut record the same year as Mogwai. But Mogwai have been plugging away pretty consistently ever since then. They haven't done a super huge amount to change their formula, but they have still tried to expand their sound in interesting ways from record to record. But yeah, this is the second consecutive record produced by David Friedman for Mogwai, and it represents their first record in 4 years. And it's also just hit number 1 on the UK albums chart as we recorded this. So
the first album to do so.
Yeah, which is crazy for an instrumental rock record.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of unprecedented to a certain extent that this hits number 1. Like, find me another number 1 album that's
Has a song
like-
called Ceiling Granny.
I think
that.
I think it's reflective of the extent to which Mogwai have become this kind of like darling, beloved tradition in Scotland and the UK in terms of this particular style of music. Like they're just not a household name, but they're really well known and really well respected. And yeah.
I agree.
I firmly believe that every Scotsman or woman or otherwise comes out of the womb and the first thing they hear is "Take Me Somewhere Nice."
Yes.
That's
Yeah. So Morgan, why don't you then talk about this record first, since I know you have some thoughts on this thing.
I can do that. I think a really good indication of why it was this record of all the Mogwai records to go to number one. I say this like I have a huge amount of information about the band. I'm talking out my ass. It's for a bit. I think the reason that this is number one is because it fucking is goddamned amazing. Like I don't. The only other one I've heard is Young Team, and I intended to rectify that this week, but then I didn't. It like I like it almost as much as that record, and perhaps that is a lot to do with the fact that I don't have a lot of history or background with this band. But yeah, this is kind of weirdly what I expected and really wanted from a Mogwai record post Young Team. This is kind of what I wanted, an evolution of their sound to sound like, and that it's basically polished to a mere sheen at this point. It's not much of a secret that Dave Friedman is pretty good at what he does. And I think a lot of that really shines through here in pretty much every song. I wanted to be a cool kid and say that the one song that had lyrics wasn't actually my favorite on the album, but I would also be fucking lying if I did.
Yeah, you would.
Richie Sacramento is obviously one of the highlights for me. Which, fun fact, while I was reading the lyrics of it, the name comes from a friend of the band who thought that was how you pronounced Ryuichi Sakamoto.
Their Mogwai have a long-standing tradition of really kind of absurd track titles that come from really random things. A similar track title is on their record Rave Tapes. They have a song called Simon Ferocious, which is named after...
Called him Simon Ferocious or something, and he didn't like that at all.
Yeah,
it's famously what Freddie Mercury referred to Sid Vicious as.
It's the greatest voice clip of all time.
Well, when you make instrumental music, you can really call your tracks whatever the fuck you want,
Yeah.
And I think, and I think my personal favorite, which is on "Come On Die Young," punk rock / Puff Daddy / Antichrist. Which is, I feel, is just a natural progression of the state of things.
Absolutely.
I have trouble describing instrumental music to some degree, especially when I've only had a week to listen to it. But I've listened to it at least once a day because it's like therapeutic and exhilarating in equal measure.
Quite frankly, I feel very similarly, and I also struggle to categorize and like assign feelings to instrumental albums, but I will say this is my first Mogwai record. I haven't given a full first listen to Young Team yet, so it's not my first exposure to them, but it is my first full record. But this album has been like, it's bad to say it like this, but like I have listened to this album and it's been phenomenal writing music just to like put on, and like Morgan got at like this album sort of just getting into your brain and sort of massaging it, kind of just getting it something that it like doesn't, you don't really properly know how to feel about it. Like there's just sort of this indefinable euphoric quality I think that it has, and it does that remarkably well. The primary word I would use to describe it is spacious. It's an album that like from the get-go, to the Bin My Friend Tonight, that song, wow, what a phenomenally structured opening. Like the way that song fucking builds and builds, I was just like, so this is what we're in for. Okay, I'm now more properly excited for what this is. Let's fucking go. and it sort of just kind of coasts on from there. Like, I love the aforementioned Richie Sacramento, not just because it's the only song on the record that has like proper lyrics to it, but like I just fucking love the distorted guitar, the drumming also fucking fantastic across the entire record, but it's fucking vicious. I'd also
Ferocious,
like to mention,
one might say.
I'd also like to mention Ceiling Granny, which is a song that like it's a lot more brief. Like a lot of the songs here are a little bit longer. You know, it's a decently sized album. In fact, the only complaint that I really have with it is that like I don't know, just with an album of this length that's just of this, you know, sort of instrumental palette, I feel like maybe 5 to 10 minutes shorter would probably be like the ideal length for me, but I can't really begrudge it that because like I don't know how much of that comes to how well it's paced and my personal taste, but like I still think it's a well-paced record that like moves along in a very steady, like there's never a point in it where I'm like, wow, this is like repetitious and this is doing something that it's already done before. But Ceiling Granny, particularly interesting moment. The riff here very much reminds me, like I could be completely talking out of my ass here, but it's like it's a distorted, more fuzzy version of a riff that I feel like I would find on like a Jimmy Eat World album. It's
what it reminds me of is Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very Siamese Dream specifically.
Yeah.
Which, and like,
you know, good.
More albums should sound like that. But I love, like, there's points on songs like Richie Sacramento where it just sort of blossoms into something a bit more, like I said earlier, spacious, and sort of that final 2-minute stretch of it where it's just sort of like the guitar just sort of gently kind of plucks, and it's just the drums kind of fade out for a second and they come back in crashing for that fucking finale, and it's fucking terrific. And I don't know, there's like just the synths also here, just they feel so wavy and groovy, and like I don't know, I haven't heard synths on an album sound like this since like It Won't Be Like This All the Time, I think would be the closest that I'd compare like the synth palette to, not like the general songs I would say, but like this I hate to say it because it's something that Tyler hates, but it's also something I hate, is that this record is a vibe. You put it on and it's sort of something that I think you sort of lay back and lose yourself to, just because it's such an immersive, deep sounding record. It has like these gorgeous palettes that are so expansive, but they're never shallow. They're always like, you feel like you're wading in them. And like I think that you can only get that from when you're a band as like mature as Mogwai, that like have been doing this stuff for as long as they have been, because I feel like a lesser band could sort of take these ideas and amalgamate them, but do them in a really skin deep and boring way. Like if any other, like if this was the debut album of some fucking post-rock band that just like came out and it would just be like, yeah, this is interesting, but it's way too fucking long, you know, like 5, 6 out of 10 kind of album. But no, there's a depth here that I feel like should be appreciated. And I think the song structuring is probably the most consistently great thing about it, is that every single track here builds upon itself absolutely flawlessly. And the fact that it doesn't get like repetitious within that structure, like the sort of builds and crescendos, the sort of like the songs have like 3-act structures, like the fact that there's like 11 of them, you could just repeat that over and over again and you would get like the same feeling and just be like, yeah, this sort of just gets old after a while. But they managed to shift up the tune, the grooves, the sounds very, very specifically and interestingly, and it's a great record. I have very few qualms with it, honestly. I think it's just a perfect, ideal post-rock experience, and it makes me want to go back and dip into the entirety of Mogwai's catalog, because if it's half this good, then I mean they're going to be like a favorite band.
What I think the only other Mogwai record I've heard is Happy Songs for Happy People, which is good. I would say this is better. The thing about that record is it reminds me much more of actually like a pre-hiatus like slow dive record in places, where it's like very spacious, very
Himalayan, basically.
like Pygmalion. It's very spacious. It's very open, very sparse in places. Whereas this is not that at all. This is much louder, fuzzier. Songs are shorter. They're higher tempo. A song like "Ceiling Granny" would sound like a different band on Happy Songs for Happy People. Because that is a song that's like, it's like 3.5 minutes, and it just fucking goes. It's raucous and fast and groovy and textural and noisy. And that's the thing, is this record weaves a very fine line between energy and loudness, and rich texture, you know. Like when I feel like they've spent 2 months choosing the fuzz pedals for every song individually, just so that when they are all played, you get like maximum amount of hang on, I'm gonna need to take a second to absorb a thought, you know, where it's just I'm just gonna
Reeves pauses for a full 10 seconds to absorb a thought.
thank you
Absorb a post-rock album.
I do not share the same feelings of positivity as everyone else so far, but I don't think it's entirely bad. So I will discuss some of the things I like first, because I think some of their attempts at a shoegaze sound here are interesting enough. Obviously that's kind of emphasized by the Delete cover art, Delete being or DLT being the artist who also does the Twilight Sads cover art. So plus they're both signed to Rock Action Records. So
I believe they've toured together as well.
I believe Mogwai created Rock Action Records.
They did.
That's
and
right.
They have an album called that.
Third album.
Correct. All of the things you're
Number
saying are
tres.
correct.
I mean, I'm dancing around my central issue here, which is I do not care for the production in the slightest. I think it sounds really claustrophobic, really compressed. It doesn't have I didn't feel it had enough range to properly encapsulate the scope of what they're going for, is the main thing. Like to the bin my friend tonight we vacated. First song point is I really like how that song kind of spends its time building and building, and then when it gets to that climax, which should be this really exciting cathartic moment, it just sounds about the same volume as everything else that's preceded, and I can't really get into it. And I went out of my way to listen to this on headphones, on various speakers throughout my house, and I couldn't find a context in which I enjoyed the sound of it. I thought it just, and it kneecaps so much of the record. It becomes an absolute slog having to deal with the same issue for just like 65 minutes, and I eventually get tired of it, you know? So that's kind of how I feel. I think the high points are quite good. It's more just how it sounds is my issue more than any individual track, any individual moment. So that's kind of how I'm feeling.
I mean, either way, it's very impressive that they made a record like this with their small, fuzzy, furry fingers that Mogwais have, you know.
Didn't that bit like die 5 hours ago?
Yes.
Also, pretty sure the plural of Mogwai is Mogwai, but
It is.
that's an epic. Okay, anyway, I actually, believe it or not, I'm actually glad that August has a slightly dissenting opinion here, because for one thing, I was not expecting this record to be otherwise so unanimously loved. And one thing I want to bring up is that this is definitely one of the least spacious sounding Mogwai records. It has a lot of compression as a definite artistic stylistic choice. and it's very kind of distorted and gets in your ears and really kind of like pummeling in a very specific way. Whereas some of their earlier records, I think of records like Happy Songs, for instance, or Rock Action, or even some of their later stuff like Hawk is Howling or Hardcore Could Never Die But You Will, more spaciously produced records. And the reason this record sounds so compressed is, of course, due to Dave Fridman. This is, as I said earlier, is the second record in which a consecutive record which they've worked with Fridman on. And I think it's fair to say that even relative to the last record they worked on, the style is much more cluttered, claustrophobic, and instrumentally varied on this record. And it results in something that is definitely, I think, going to be polarizing. And I'm not too surprised that some people, or a decent chunk of the audience, aren't necessarily able to get on board with it. As for me, I like this record quite a bit, but I am a little bit conflicted on certain aspects of it with relation to that and some other things as well. There are parts of this record that I think are Mogwai at their absolute best, and there are other parts of this record where I think there's definitely room for improvement. I think this is one of the more inconsistent Mogwai records. And I say this as the only person here who has listened to their entire discography and has followed them for a great number of years. I've been a fan since 2013. And they're just a really influential band on me. And I always really, really dug their aesthetic, their relatively minimal style, the way that they managed to make the most gigantic sounding musical climaxes that you've ever heard in your life. Like, there are moments on records like Young Team and Hawk is Howling and that sort of thing, where they get so loud it's almost unbelievable that a group of 3 or 4 guys can physically do this. But yeah, so anyway, I'm not surprised that it's as divisive as it has been. A lot of people have kind of tuned away from Mogwai in recent years. There's a lot of criticism they get for being samey and kind of making the same record over and over again, which is not necessarily a point that's without merit. But I do think that the reason why I still stick with Mogwai is that they do always do interesting new things on each record. And in many ways, As the Love Continues is actually their most ambitious record in some time in terms of the sheer musical variation on it. The reason why I have so much to say about it, despite the fact that I'm a little more mixed on it, is actually that they did a Twitter listening party for this record yesterday, the day before we recorded, and the record played through, and every single member of Mogwai was listening along and gave insights into the recording process and the inspirations behind each song. So I thought this was such a cool little resource that came just in time. I really wanted to integrate a lot of that into what I have to say about the record, because yeah, you're right, it is kind of difficult to think of interesting ways of talking about instrumental music, like besides just describing how it sounds. So I'm kind of hoping that I'll be able to give a little more color to this record and maybe even help August to appreciate it a little bit more, even if you can't get past the way that it sounds. So I think To the Bid, My Friend, Tonight We Vacate Earth is a great opener. It's the opening piano chords are apparently influenced by Noise' third record, Noise 75. I love the way that they come in so gently and plaintively, and you have this tapping cymbal. And the interesting thing about the drums on this track, or interesting thing about the track itself, is that the track was actually recorded at a much faster speed than you're hearing on the record, but it was slowed down. And that's the reason why the drums on this track have this really strange and shuffly sound that makes them sound really huge and almost hypnotic. Another cool, interesting fact is that the title of this track, To the Bid, My Friend, Tonight We Vacate Earth, which is a vocal snippet you hear at the very beginning, is actually spoken by the electronic music artist Blank Mass. And more specifically, it's actually a sample of him talking in his sleep. Apparently he talks in his sleep, and so he's quite friendly with the guys in Mogwai. So why don't you record yourself talking in your sleep? He did that, and they sent it through to him, and they really liked this particular snippet of meaningless words. They thought it was really funny, and so they decided to put it at the start of their album.
Yeah, it was actually the reason I listened to Light Bulb Sun was because of that clip, because it reminded me of
last chance to evacuate planet Earth before it's
Yeah.
recycled.
because
Yeah.
I already find the cult that's related to interesting, and it reminded me of that, and I was like, well, I should
Yeah.
finally listen to the record. So
I love the way that this kind of slow build track turns into a shoegazy dream pop exercise halfway through. It's beautifully swelling, but it also has that crunch of Fridman's distortion that fans will be familiar with from Every Country's Son. That record specifically, I think that you guys, August Accepted, because of the production, will really love, because that record is like this record but heavier.
Okay.
But anyway, I like, as I said, I like the way this turns into a dream poppy sort of thing halfway through. But yeah, the Fridman distortion, and I'll get to this throughout the record. There are times where I think the distortion really enhances the effect of the tracks, and there are times when I think that compression takes away from it. I also want to say that the effect of this track and its slow build with the crisp piano is very reminiscent of their song Auto Rock, which was the opening song on Mr. Beast and memorably featured in the final scene of Michael Mann's Miami Vice. Just a fact. Yeah, but it's a pretty strong opener.
Just a fact, no opinions.
Well, yeah,
I don't have time for your opinions.
I wasn't going to get into my opinions, so
I just I'm saying it was like an address to us.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, let's not get into it.
So exactly what I said.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you get a really quirky track in the second track, Here We Go Forever, which I really dig. It has these distorted drum machine loops and incredibly distorted vocal fuzz, like really distorted. It reminded me a little bit of the last Low record, Double Negative, and also reminded me a bit of Kanye's Runaway. And the way that this vocal effect was created was actually with a broken guitar pedal, and the vocals were kind of fed through that, which I think is really creative and gives this really jarring effect on them that sounds so bizarre. You have this really pretty mellotron piano led melody. There's a couple of moments where this kind of mellotron piano shows up on this record. It's honestly a pretty ugly sounding track overall, because of the way that these kind of bizarre sounds come together. But I do like the way that the affected vocals have a sharpness to them. It gives them kind of the effect of almost like a serrating guitar sound. And then the track kind of blossoms midway through as well. I think it's really good. I really dig this track. Dry Fantasy also features mellotron piano, but it also has these slow divey reverbed guitar lines at the start of it that are really pretty and kind of spacious. And I should maybe, instead of slow dive, I should say Minor Victories, which is the side project of Slow Dive and Mogwai. And you get more of that in there as well. The synth line in this track is influenced very specifically by Vangelis Blade Runner score, and I think it shows. It's beautifully spacious and evocative. However, there is about 2 minutes into this track, there's this distorted fuzzing effect that comes in to the background, and I have to say I immensely dislike it. This very one detail, it sounds like just like a compression artifact, and I think it ruins the song, which is otherwise very pretty. Richie Sacramento. Morgan's already told the story of where the name of this track comes from. It's the only track with discernible vocals, courtesy of Stewart, who does sing at least once on most Mogwai records, since Rock Action anyway. It's a very beautiful sounding pop song. Unfortunately, I do think it's also one of the biggest victims of the compression of this record, in terms of that being something that works against this particular track rather than for it. The song itself is very pretty if you cast aside the distortion. I would love to hear like a live studio version of this song, or just a version where the beauty at the heart of it is more kind of clear rather than sort of buried. And the song itself is a tribute to David Berman, the late David Berman, of Purple Mountains fame and Silver Jews. And the lyric in this song, Rise Crystal Spear, is specifically a reference to an anecdote in which Dave apparently said those words while throwing a shovel at a sports car.
Sounds about right.
Another irrelevant but funny anecdote. Then you get
not the only time we're going to be talking about things chasing cars this evening.
No. Then you get to Drive the Nail, which is one of the longest tracks. It's 7 minutes long. It's your bog standard Mogwai post-rock slow build. We saw plenty of these on Every Country's Son. In fact, on basically every Mogwai record, you get a track. It's very similar to this. Ultimately, I think it's very enjoyable. It does suffer a little bit from sounding quite similar to other tracks they've done in the past. But it's not bad at all. It absolutely bashes. I think the compression here actually enhances the guitars on this track. It does lose nuance in the drums though, which end up kind of laden with static and sort of feel a bit, they don't sound as crisp as I think they should. But that's a minor quibble. Then you get Fuck Off Money, which was actually originally written for the last album, but then went through some rewrites for this record, including the addition of a purring synth and vocoder vocals in the first half of the song that I think give it much more character. It has a similar massive build quality to Drive the Nail, but to me, this track feels much fresher and more interesting texturally, as well as not having the compression problem on the drums that the last track had. I think it's really strong. And just for the record, it's not, is it Fuck Off? I can't remember now whether it's Fuck Off Money or Fuck Off Money or Fuck Off Money. One of those three.
Sorry, what was the difference in the three things you just said?
I think there would be a hyphen between fuck off money on one of them, as in money that is for a fuck off.
So you got like fuck off money, you've got fuck off money, and you got fuck off money.
There is no punctuation.
Fuck off money.
Yeah. Anyway.
Punctuate is do.
Phil, am I having a stroke?
Yes.
Anyway, Ceiling Granny is the best song on the record. I think an absolute late career highlight for the band. It's, as has already been said, it's pretty overtly influenced by Siamese Dream era Smashing Pumpkins. In fact, the guitar could have come right from that record, except it does have a kind of sublime and surreal quality in its own way that makes it feel different. The title, of course, comes from The Exorcist 3. And another fun fact about this track, apparently it was originally slowed, again, much like the opening track, apparently it was originally slowed down and added to be played at a slower pace, but then Friedman insisted they speed it up. And I think that was the right decision because the track hits much harder and has this great kind of pummeling and single-like feel. I'm a little annoyed they didn't release this one as a single, honestly, because it would have been great. A little taste of the record. Then you get to, I think, one of the most interesting and ambitious tracks instrumentally on the record, Midnight Flit. It's another track that starts from a drum machine loop, but it actually has musical contributions from Trent Reznor's longtime collaborator, Atticus Ross. Specifically, Atticus Ross composed and conducted the string arrangement that you hear in this song. And quite interestingly, the string arrangement was conducted entirely through Zoom with an orchestra in Budapest being directed by Atticus from Los Angeles. So it's a great example of quarantine ingenuity. The string addition on this track adds so much theatricality to the track. All these different colors that you don't get anywhere else on the record. It just feels like the record has come to life in a really, really wonderful way, and with some sounds that are completely different from anything else on the record. It's a huge highlight. Great song. I think you'll all be amused to hear the origin of the track title, Pat Stains. It actually comes from one of the band members misremembering the name of Foo Fighters guitarist Pat Smear.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious to me. It lilts along pleasantly enough. It does feel a little bit like Mogwai on autopilot, but I think it is elevated by the outside contributions, specifically the featuring of Colin Stetson on saxophone and vocals. He adds this layered, dense mix of his trademark saxophone tones. Like you can hear them straight out of one of his last few records, or like the Hereditary soundtrack, for instance, just kind of bubbling at the base of the track. And you actually hear him giving vocals, actually singing towards the end of this track, wordless vocals, which is really awesome. The track's in a particularly odd time signature of 9/4, which I thought was interesting. But I just wish, so what Colin's doing is great, and the band are very, competent, but I wish that they were a little more ambitious with the actual composition of the track. The melody, I think, is a very sedentary, and I wish that it were a little more interesting to me. That's just for me anyway. In many ways, this track does sound quite a lot like the quieter moments of a record like Come On Die Young, but I think it worked a bit better on that record because on that record the production's much sparser and more haunting, almost like that record sounds like a Slint record, to be honest. But here the production style is very different, so you get a slightly different effect that I think the compression kind of takes away again from the impact. Supposedly We Were Nightmares is a more upbeat and soaring piece of standard Mogwai, very pleasant, layered nicely, reminiscent of their earlier albums Mr. Beast and Hardcore Will Never Die But You Will. I do think this track kind of does plod along a little bit, but I think it has a little bit more interesting melodic exploration in the second half. So it's not all bad. But however, I love the closing track. It's What I Want to Do, Mum is a great closer, a classic Mogwai slow build that feels more successful than something like Drive the Nail, for instance, because it has more ambition and clarity. No one's going to accuse it of being the most creative thing in the world, but it sounds crunchy and big and spacious and intimate all at the same time. And when it finally erupts to life, 4.5 minutes through, with this ethereal, soaring melody just kind of blaring on top of the guitar, it's just goosebumps. It's so fucking good. It's everything a Mogwai closer should be. And I want to shout out the fact that Mogwai are consistently excellent at album closers. Every single record of theirs, one of the 3 best tracks, if not the best track, is the album closer. They always nail it. And this is no exception. They did not reveal what I Want to Do, Mum as a title refers to, but I just find it really absurdly funny for some reason. It's just a very fucking weird.
Yeah, well, especially because
it's been 20 plus years and they're still having this argument with their mums.
Yeah, I think that's the joke about how they're kind of like poking fun about the fact that they've been around forever. And they're kind of these kind of like, industry monoliths veterans who are just kind of reliably churning out record after record. But yeah, as a Mogwai,
but also I can imagine the conversation with their parents where it's like, so you want to make instrumental long form rock music for a
like when
living.
You send a rock album in the post, is that what you mean?
You sounded like John Mulaney then.
It's evolved to the point now where it's like, you want to compress it this much? Like, I don't see any money in it. I don't. Yeah. What are you gonna do for a living?
As a Mogwai fan, I did like this record quite a bit. I think I liked the last record more, but I mean, again, I have the benefit of being able to make all these comparisons. I imagine to a pair of fresh ears, it sounds a lot more interesting. And so I'm pleased that you have all enjoyed it so much. It's very great to see that these guys have continued to challenge themselves and incorporate really interesting musical ideas into their stuff. And it's awesome to me. It's really satisfying to me to be reviewing a Mogwai record on this podcast and hearing so much praise for it, because they're a band that I never imagined you guys would be huge on for whatever reason. Stupid of me, I guess. But yeah, even though I'm not over the moon with it myself, I will say about half of this record is easily top shelf.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Cool.
Right. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken?
No. I think we're good.
We're all good.
All right.
Okay, right. Jumps into the order.
Well, my 3 favorite tracks would have to be Simon Ferocious, fucking Richie Sacramento, Ceiling Granny, and To the Bin, My Friend. And least favorite track, I think I will say Drive the Nail. It's not a bad track. It's just it's just kind of long. That would be the track that I would knock this off, and it might actually improve for me somewhat. But yeah, I'd give the album a tentative 7.5 due to drop or raise with half of a point with time.
Nice. That leaves us with August.
3 favorite tracks: Richie, Sacramento, Ceiling Granny, and the first one, I don't care to say what it's called. Least favorite, probably like supposedly We Were Nightmares, maybe. I don't know. It's like a 5.5 out of 10.
Fair enough. Morgan.
5 favorites are Ryuichi Sakamoto, Tooth Bin, and Midnight Flit. Least favorite, I will also go Drive the Nail. It's like I've only heard one other album from this band, and like Drive the Nail just really sounds like your bog standard Mogwai track, so I can't.
Yeah.
That's probably not a good thing. But yeah, it's like 9 out of 10.
Wow.
A bit of
Nice.
a teeny flavor of Christopher Walken in your inflection there.
I was going for German, but that works too. 9.
The poor people want what the rich people
No.
got. And
Yeah,
No.
My favorite tracks are To the Bin, My Friend, Tonight We Vacate Earth, Here We Go Forever, and I would say Richie Sacramento and Seed and Granny, and the opener. My least favorite is Drive the Nail. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10.
Okay, my 3 favorite tracks are Ceiling Granny, Midnight Flit, and It's What I Want to Do, Mum. My least favorite track is, that distorted fuzz on Dry Fantasy really wrecks the song for me, so I'm going to say that one. But I mean, everything else about it is beautiful. I will give this record a 7 out of 10.
Okay, that's fair enough. An average is 7.4, and we have a few records at 7.4. Cardiac Sing to God, Full Circle Nightmare, Carl Craft, Magic One and Tricks Point Never, and We Will Always Love You by the Avalanches.
Good shit.
Yeah, good company.
Similarly on. It's not true, actually.
Well, I guess that's up for this episode of the James and Tea podcast.
Crazy.
But for real though, we are about to record our record club episode, so that is going to be out a few hours after this episode drops. So if you are listening to it right now and it's past that time, go check it out or go check it out later.
August, what's the record we're going to be talking about?
The record we are going to be talking about is the one, the only Philosophy of the World by legendary New Hampshire group The Shags.
The Peerless The Shags.
Yeah, and next week's
you
record
say
club
that, but are they not peerless?
I meant no sarcasm.
All right,
None at all.
Good.
Anyway, but next week's record club is Morgan. It's a very interesting choice. Do you want to mention what it is, Morgan?
Yeah, next week we will be doing Green Day's 21st Century Breakdown.
Oh, shit. No way.
Inflict a breakdown in at least one of us. So
121 guns!
One gun.
Our main review. But our main reviews next week are both incredibly interesting records. That being Little Oblivions by Julian Baker.
what are you doing?
What the hell is happening?
And the first non-soundtrack album from Nick Cave and Warren Ellis outside of their work with the Bad Seeds. That being the only record out of the two I've already heard. That being Carnage. Very interesting record. I think we're all going to have a lot to say about it.
So let us know in the comments below what you think about either of the records we discussed today, Mogwai or Black Dresses. What are your favorite?
All right. As always, rock over London, rock on Chicago, KFC, finger licking good.